Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming, and in this case, wizardsrespite.com. Welcome to another episode of Let's Start With Their Name. This is a podcast in which I interview a TTRPG player about one of their impactful characters, a character that may be their favorite, maybe just one that was very interesting, something along those lines, and we just talk about the characters. We shoot the shit, proverbially, about some RPGs. Today, my guest is actually my podcast host from the gaming side of the Old Man Gaming channel, a horrible gaming podcast. He's also done many different streams with me. He is also on the Ordo Scriptorium actual play with us, and we have another actual play coming up that he's going to be on, and I'm going to say his actual name, motherfuckers, Neil Simpson.
Hello. You may know me as AKA Tiny Wizard.
Now that was you. That wasn't me. That was you.
How many years now? And it's like, no, you did it. You did it. You did it.
It's a running joke for everybody out there. Neil, I started saying a Tiny Wizard every time. Neil, aka a Tiny Wizard, and now it's like if I don't say it, it's sacrilege somehow. To the point where he went on another podcast and made them call him that because he said that I would get mad if they didn't call him that. Nonetheless, it has been an interesting, I think, 5 years at this point with Neil.
Something like that, yeah.
In the video game space, but me and Neil have only recently gotten to, in the last year or two, gotten to start playing role-playing games together. We both knew that we played role-playing games. It's just we live very far apart, and it took our channel kind of turning into half TTRPG stuff to kind of get him into some actual plays with me in it, and it's just been very interesting.
It only took a global pandemic for us to really kick it off.
I mean, the global pandemic was great for actual play podcasts.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so let's get into it then. Neil has selected his character. So, Neil, let's start with their name.
So the one character that I always go to when I think about like a character that I've ever had is going to be my wild magic wizard, Valcron the Unknowable. Eventually, he got the title whenever I got my wild magic side of things with him. He's a wizard that we had him in.
Oh, hold on. Hold on. You're getting to the backstory question before we even got there.
Jeez. Okay.
No. I liked how you're doing that. I was about to say, I'm going to just like go over here and take a nap. He's going to just do the rest of it himself. I'm assuming
going to you for a while.
My next question is what game it is, but I can assume from the words wild magic that this is a D&D game.
Yes. D&D, yeah. D&D specifically 3.5 edition.
How old is this character? How long ago did you play this character?
Oh, God. He came into being in 2009.
Ooh.
So he's been kicking around for a while, and I still bring him back in as like a reoccurring multiverse traveler sort of situation.
Because other than on the channel, in your personal life, you've transitioned to Game Master at this point.
Yes. So just a real quick back into my experience with tabletop gaming. I didn't even get into it until I was in college.
Okay.
It was 2009, and there's a friend of mine, Henry, that I met up in culinary school, and then a buddy of mine too that I went to high school with, Rob. We all kind of glommed together because we all like the same stuff, and Henry was like, hey, you want to roll up some D&D characters? And I'm like, I have no idea what this is. Get this nerd shit out of here, because I was like, I was one of the cool gamers that I only like played like shooters and stuff like that when I first really into it at an earlier age. And then Valcron was not the first that I made. He was the second, though. The first one was me just kind of getting everything figured out and what I liked and how the game worked. But from there, I enjoyed everything so much that I ended up running a campaign very briefly when we were in school. But whenever we kind of moved away, Everybody went their separate ways. I fell off of everything pretty quick, just because it's one of those things you can't really do on your own.
Yeah.
And then from
there,
you
can nowadays. Crazily.
Well, you can nowadays.
You couldn't in 2009 very easily.
There was, because there was stuff, I forget what it was, but there's like earlier versions of digital tabletops that we had considered trying to get together on and do stuff. I can't remember the name of some of them. It's probably like Roll20 and stuff like that.
Right.
But
Foundry, I think one of them's called.
Yeah. But it wasn't really until I want to say 2016 that I really delved into like the DMing, and now I'm like a permanent staple DM now because that is the curse.
I see. Yeah, that is the curse, man. Once you're a DM forever. That's how it works. Okay, well that's enlightening. Let's go to the one that you are already rolling into. So, I'm sorry, Valcron? Valcron. I'll get it. The unknowable. I got the unknowable part. Valcron the Unknowable. Let's hear that backstory.
So, Valcron's backstory basically was he was a crap wizard who everything that he did, everything that he tried to do, he couldn't necessarily get everything kicking off to like learn magic any way that he tried. So he actually ended up making a deal with a Baylor. And the deal was basically which is hilarious because this is basically like a warlock thing.
Yeah,
I just wanted to play a wizard, but
were there warlocks back in 2009? I
believe there were. I believe there were. I know there were sorcerers, but I don't know warlocks.
When I played D&D, which was a very, very long time ago, AD&D, just the old school AD&D, there was sorcerers or there was wizards, or you fucked off. Like that was it.
Yeah. So what I ended up doing was effectively making this deal, and the price was one to be paid unexpectedly, effectively. I was basically, the contract that was made was I would get the ability to be one of the greatest wizards out there, but it would incur a terrible toll, a terrible cost, and the price would be paid at some point. And he thought it was going to be down the road. It's like nobody would just take anything. Like whatever they're going to take, it's just going to be eventually. That's a later problem. Basically, as soon as the deal was struck, he went back home and found that his wife no longer existed. But in her place was a cloak. And basically was her soul bound into this cloak. So the cloak that he wore was effectively her. So it was like animated and would do stuff, but it wouldn't like give him like powers or anything like
the
that.
magic carp from Aladdin?
Yes.
His poor wife.
Yes, his poor wife got turned into a rug. And that was his whole thing, was to go about and he wanted to reverse everything. He wanted to go after that Baylor because at this point he figured if he took out the Baylor, it would break the contract and she would come back. So that was the whole shtick. Now that originally he was just Valcron. But Valcron was a very like noble, good-hearted individual, but was extremely gullible. So his whole deal then, on his journeys, struck a deal with a wizard to get everything all figured out, and he then lost his soul with the promise of the payment was going to be his soul being taken away, knowing full well what he had to do to get his wife's soul back. So he traded effectively. But that's where we get the wild magic from, is that wizard was completely untrained. And then from there, mixed with that Baylor sort of magic, how that all pact worked out. So it was all uncontrollable. So everything he always tried to do was just all over the place all the time, which I absolutely loved. I loved how the DM, that my buddy Henry, would weave this stuff in. He would force us to write a backstory. And like my players, I'm just kind of tell them like, hey, you know, give me an idea. I don't need like strict beat for beat, because I like to provide the players opportunities. Like
Right.
if something comes up naturally, well, what would your character do, or what has historically shaped your character's thoughts about ABC, XYZ, you know,
Right,
to
right.
develop it slowly. He wanted a whole backstory, and your backstory would dictate your starting level between level 4 to 6.
Oh, wow.
So, yes. So, if depending on your story, you were all right.
That's an interesting take on character creation.
It was very interesting. He also was very strict with experience points too. He was very experience point based. It wasn't like I like the mile marker leveling. But yeah, with that, he would weave that stuff in so you would get your moments. And I did get one of my moments.
Well, I'm glad you talk about that, because we're definitely going to talk about his moments later on. I think it's interesting that the backstory with the thing, I tend to be a little bit more in your camp. I would rather, especially if the player is like newer to RPGs, I like to just be like, just make a character that you can identify with. And then the backstory will be what, like, to me, I've always thought of role-playing games as like level 1 is where your backstory is. You know, if you need a backstory, you're already at level 4 or 5. You've already been through some shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're at level 1, if you're starting at level 1, then you know, and you're a fresh-faced adventurer who's like, I'm gonna go into a dungeon, right? Right. You haven't lost your eye and all the people you love, you know. But yeah, I and that's not no disrespect to the backstory way of doing things. I've definitely had some characters where I wrote up some fucking novels. I had a character recently where they were a street gang runner, and I wrote up every personnel in the street gang, how he acquired the street gang, where the street gang was located, what their home base was. So like I see both sides of that. But back to Valcron. So my next question, character creation comes around. They're like, hey, it's time to create a character. Especially with this guy who's like, I need a full fucking backstory before you even sit down at the table. What's your motivation behind Valcron? Why did you want to play this wizard? Where did the story come from? Like, where did the idea of Valcron the Unknowable kind of like manifest itself in your brain? Where do you think it came from?
So, I think it came from...
And everybody has the hardest time with this question.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it.
Because sometimes you have that direct inspiration. So, like, I mean, as an example, my very first character that I ever made was modeled after Titus from Final Fantasy X.
Okay.
Basically, carbon copy, like, bam. Valcron was more of... I like the idea of a wizard, but I have always been, you know, a sucker for the stereotypical tragic backstory when making a tabletop character. I try to steer from it as much as I can, because I know full well if I allow myself to be, every single character they make is going to be a sob story, and you know, it has seen some shit, you know.
I mean, it's a fair instinct. I mean,
100%.
It's a staple of the genre.
I mean, you got to figure too. Yeah, it's a staple of the genre, but you got to figure too. I mean, you have to have something happen to you to want to go on an adventure or force you to do that. Yeah. And that's kind of where I approached this: is what could make somebody who is so bad at what it is that they want to do not only have the ability to go do it, but have a reason to potentially want to undo it. And I had that thought in my mind because his end game, what I was hoping for a resolution eventually for him was going to be, we never really finished the campaign that was associated with that character.
Also a staple of the genre.
Yeah.
Not finishing campaigns.
Yeah. But what I was hoping for the resolution was that in the end he was going to lose his power. Because with the deals that he struck, he was going to get his wife's soul back. His wife would return. He would live out the rest of his days effectively almost powerless, maybe a little bit of residual magic left over, but he would live his days knowing that he did what he had to do, that eventually someday, one day, he was going to die and he was going to just basically be lost to the void, and that was the price that he paid for saving the love of his life, effectively.
That's a really cool backstory. I also like the dynamic of he is... Like, one thing that makes him different, I mean, we say stable of the genre, like he's a cliche, in the fact that he's got some shit in his past that makes him go out and do stuff. But I do like the fact that his overarching goal is to not have any of the power that he has. Like, not to get better, not to level up. His overarching goal is to just get rid of it all, which is very, very interesting. I think his overall goal is to just not do it anymore.
It's like next level regrets, man. Go on an entire world quest fighting demons to not.
That's really awesome. Okay, getting down to the nitty gritty. My next question: what's his moment? And I'm talking about the first moment that stands out in your mind as, like, maybe it was a character development moment, maybe it was a moment of role play for you, maybe it was a moment where you resonated with the character more, whatever that means to you. What is this character's, like, most defining moment to you? Tell us about that.
So I think there's one that is of, like, the character and a high, and there is one that is of me as a player, somewhat from a low. So the one that really stands out to me immediately is there was a fight that we got into. Effectively, it was a war. Well, I wouldn't call it a war, but like a very large battle in which we were trying to, like, protect a town from an assault, effectively, and it was a demon horde effectively going after the town. However, it was one of the moments, like I mentioned, to where they weave the DM would weave the story in from the individual to where the one who was leading the charge was that Baylor. So I went from in that it was me as the player. We were actually in the fitness center of the school. The one friend of mine, Rob, would work in that fitness center. So whenever he worked in it, he basically had keys to it, and it shut down at a certain time. But one of the benefits that he had was he could come and go as he pleased. So if he wanted to in the middle of the night, he could go in there. We occasionally would do our tabletop games in there.
That's awesome.
Because we could then be loud.
That's awesome.
Because otherwise, if we had a moment and everybody would like, one of Henry's neighbors was a very light sleeper, and she would pound on the wall anytime we did anything. So sometimes if we knew, like, there was going to be some crazy shit, we would go there. So it was late in the middle of the night. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning. We had just had, like, this is like an all-day session sort of situation, which, looking back on it now, I have no idea how I was able to survive during those. And
I complete digression. Amen. I am 43. I have one in-person game. I play 2 weeks out of the month, and we play from like 8 to 2 in the morning, and I can't walk the next day.
That's a lot, man.
It's a lot. I and all I've been doing is sitting, talking, and occasionally smoking my pipe because we play in the garage. And, like, I will, like, wake up at, like, 2 and, like, stumble out of bed and, like, crawl to the porch. And, like, it's like I drank all night. It's crazy. This stuff just kicks the shit out of me. Nowadays, like, 2-hour session, I'm good. That's my sweet spot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 2 hours, maybe 3 if it's a big one. But after that, I'm like, whoo. So we had that in, like, the real world going on. But then, when I noticed this, it was a complete switch that flipped. I went from, because the character, that was his whole thing, is nothing else matters. So the second that he realized that the Baylor was there, went full invisibility, snuck as much as he possibly could, up to a good vantage point and actually climbed up on some rocks that were above where this thing was at. At that point, I started stacking things, effects. I don't know if you remember from 3.5, you could do some things, your meta magic feats, basically. So I had a spell that I used constantly, Belker Claws, which my flavor of it just basically put this like poisonous smoke on his fingertips and basically use like a scratch attack. But what it would do is that poison would effectively, it was like 2d12 damage per turn for like a certain number of turns. So I would do extend, sudden maximize on those. And I can't remember if you were actually allowed to use 2 of your meta magic feats on one thing at the same time, to be honest. But you know,
if your game master said okay, your game master said okay. That's how the game works, baby.
DM said it was fine. It was fine.
Yeah, damn straight.
I asked him, I was like, okay, so this is literally what I want to do. Am I allowed to do it or not? And his response was, the dice will give you the answer. So I was like, okay. So my thing was, I was going to leap down and just basically claw the shit out of this thing and get him poisoned with it. Because you got to figure, if you know anything about D&D, this thing is a Baylor. This thing is beef town, like the creme de la creme. We were a party of, I think at this point we were level 11 or 12, already doing other things. A Baylor's like CR 18, CR 20, something stupid like that.
Scary creatures. I know enough to know
scary,
that.
Very scary things.
Baylors are the you shall not pass demons from fucking Lord of the Rings.
Exactly, yes, it's the you shall not pass demon.
Gandalf had to fucking throw him off a mountain and die to kill him. So
yes. So I rolled high enough. It was like a 17 or something like that, and it was just enough for me to land on him and make that contact. Now I paid the price for that. He ended up literally picking me up and yeeting me. And if you remember, wizards were super squishy back then. D4 hit die. So just getting thrown was like, you don't go close range with one of those, with any wizard anyways, but especially one of those earlier wizards.
Hey man, he's got to do it though. Got to do what he's got to do.
He had to do it. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Got thrown into a rock. One single attack like almost killed him in one hit, but it was enough for him to retreat and back off. Because the damage on that was absolutely insane, constantly hitting. So it was actually doing something to him when we by all accounts shouldn't have been able to. The other one, which I won't go in as much depth with because it's me as a player kind of really learning how to play the game, because I didn't really I always treated it like a video game.
Okay.
I was treated like a video game, and
a lot of people do. I think it's one of the biggest problems in gaming is that D&D makes it kind of feel like a video game too, which is why I tend to if somebody wants to get into role-playing games, I try and steer them away from D&D to start. I'm like, look, it's a fine system, but to start, it makes you think video game, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So we were on a trek to basically we were looking for somebody who was they were told to be abducted, and they had some information. So we go through this dungeon, we go through the whole thing, and then we get up to the main room that's very clearly the boss room. So we poke in there, and I notice I roll a perception, and it's that's a fucking vampire. And I'm like, holy shit, that's a fucking vampire. That's a goddamn vampire. So a lot of us were kind of new to everything too. So I'm like, dude, it's a fucking vampire. And everybody's like, oh, if I had a vampire, holy shit, that's a vampire. And then everybody was like, oh my God, it's a vampire. So we did this whole thing where we did this big, huge, drawn out plan, because we were we want to make sure that we take care of this thing as soon as humanly possible, because it's going to control us. And then, it's going to go bad real fast. Right. So we basically all scream and charge in, just with our plan, to be fair, and just started attacking this vampire. And I didn't know it at this time, but the DM was like, okay, all right, I guess we're doing this. And we're going.
You should always be leery of that reaction from a game master. Yes. When a game master is like, "You sure you want to do that?" Like, you should always like.
So we were like, I'm casting polymorph on myself to turn into a goddamn dragon. Like, everybody's like doing everything that they can to just blast this dude. And we were, not necessarily matched for him, but we were doing everything that we possibly could. And then in retrospect, in hindsight, basically, we found out that because this wasn't the way this was supposed to go, the DM kind of combined what the boss encounter was going to be into this. Because after 6 hours of a single combat encounter, because we were just trying everything under the sun, we finally beat this vampire. We're like, oh my God, like, we are victorious. This is the best thing ever. We did everything that we needed to do, put our foot forward to do what we needed to do. So after it was all done, Henry got up and started freaking out on us because he was like, that was the guy you needed to find, you racist fucks. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, just because vampire doesn't mean bad. You see vampire and you think bad.
Yeah, that's true.
So it was funny because, we wasted a whole session and didn't even do anything in the end because he's like, well, this guy's kind of integral to stuff. So, like, I guess I'm going to have him turn into mist and reappear later or something.
Well, and that was a learning experience for Henry. They're going to fuck it up. They're all going to fuck it up all the time.
I think any DM out there has had a circumstance to where you have a perfectly laid out, very obvious plan as to what it is that you want to happen, and your players do just the complete opposite.
I used to have plans. I don't even have plans anymore. I have a loose idea of who the bad guy is, what I want you to accomplish, and then that's it. Just do what you're going to do. Because, I've said this a lot on Sanctorum, and I hate to say this because I don't like jazz, the music, but everybody wants D&D or dungeon mastering to be rock and roll, but it's jazz. It's jazz. It's improv. It is not the planned stuff. It's the, how do we do this, Okay, so, final big question for Valcron. What is your biggest regret with Valcron? Now, this could be out of character, just playing him a certain way. It could be not being able to finish him. It could be something in character that he did that you wish you hadn't done, which you may have just told us his biggest regret. Yeah. But something along those lines. Like, what's Valcron as a character, like playing him or in the character? What's the biggest regret with your time with him, I guess?
I think it's going to be the not being able to finish out his story. Just because he, like I'd mentioned before, he's still he's my favorite character that I've ever made. In any sort of tabletop capacity. To be absolutely clear, too, Vast is actually my second favorite I've made, just so you know.
Oh, Vast!
Yeah, I loved Vast. I loved everything about Vast.
Yeah, Vast is fun. They were all fun.
But with Valcron, I wanted to finish that story arc. Overall, I feel like I did everything else with him. And like I mentioned, too, he is a reoccurring character. I have had him, my head canon, effectively, is he has made peace with the situation that he was in. And while it's not necessarily, giving up, it's finding a different way to save his wife's soul. Which is why it was why I turned him into this multiversal traveler, to where he very much jumps between different realms and timelines. He still retains the same knowledge from all of those things. He has been now in 3 separate campaigns, because I will bring him back just so that I can spend some more time with him. Perfect example. I was doing the one of the very few campaigns I've ever finished was one of the ones that I was running with Kayla and her cousins and everything. I turned him into he wound up being a multiversal traveler, like I said, but he showed up in an area. Basically, he popped it into existence in the wrong spot and got arrested, and basically was put in a magical jail cell that he couldn't do anything with. And they will know him as the wizard with just the biggest shit-eating grin and the stupidest hat on the face of the earth. Because that was his character that I made him. Like, he kind of got full of himself when he got the power, even though he wanted to get rid of it. So he was always kind of a shit when it came to that sort of stuff. And the running joke too was the only time that he could actually roll good was when he was trying to fuck something. So it really, truly, it was absolutely insane. We actually have somewhere, Henry still has it, a picture that he had a friend of his that was an artist, and she drew a picture of our party, but it was hilarious because like Valcron was doing a pelvic thrust, and there was like the other Rob's character was a barbarian half chain demon who was like the most badass dude ever, but he was just an invisible outline because he never made it to sessions half the time. Like it was full of that sort of stuff. So I feel like Valcron ran the gamut, and did what he needed to do. I just wish that I had more time with him, and that's why I still try to bring him back into things. I just wish that I got that proper conclusion for that story overall. And I guess maybe that other story would be the biggest regret. But that's more a me regret, because looking back on it, it's like, wow, that's dumb that I wasted that much time. And it was all me because I hyped everybody else up.
Well, and I get it though. You don't think about it that like, it's hard in the moment, and that's something that D&D does. Is it preconditions you for like, oh, it's a monster, we have to kill it. It's sentient. You could talk to it. Like you could potentially attempt to talk to it. Hell, you could potentially attempt to talk your way out of goblins. Thank you, Baldur's Gate 3. Just because it's a monster with an experience point value does not mean you need to go murder it. Right. That being said, have you ever thought about wrapping Valcron's story as a game master, like making the storyline about the players trying to take down the Baylor and bring peace to Valcron as an NPC, or would that cheapen it for you?
I feel like it would cheapen it for me, and the reason being, I feel like there's always the story that you want your character to have, and then what the story actually is. Mm-hmm. And with me taking the reins on that to some degree, I feel like that's cheating. Because it's not like, in life, whenever you go through, you want to do something. There's what you want to do and what actually happens. You can't just say, well, I'm going to make the decision that this is what's going to happen, but kind of throw it in somebody else's hands. Mm-hmm. Because as selfish as it is, he's my character, and I want to be the one who resolves that. Right. I wouldn't necessarily want something else to be done with that. Now, that also said, as funny as it is that you bring that up, there is currently talk of us starting a new campaign. Kayla's one cousin was actually running a campaign for us, and it was his first time DMing, so I was giving him some pointers and everything, but he had a lot of stuff going on in his life, and he's since moved now, so he's like, I don't know if I'll be able to keep him. And it's like, it's fine, dude, it's fine.
I get it.
So then everybody was like, they did the hey, turn to me thing, and I've gotten it out of my system being yes. I've gotten it out of my system from just being a player character for a little bit. Right. So like I just need to do it every now and again to just be that player character in that world, to do what I need to do to just satiated.
Everybody needs that. You just can't DM all the time. The guy who runs for me, Wiz. Everybody needs to play every so often.
Yeah,
even if you're a game master.
And it's now to the point that like I've had my little vacation. And I'm starting to put something together, and without getting too much into it, because eventually Kayla might listen to this, and I don't want anything to be spoiled or potentially alluded to. Let's just say that Baylor is going to be an inspiration for the big bad of what I'm looking to throw together.
That's kind of cool. I think that my next podcast is going to be called Unfinished Business, and it's going to be me just finding players with characters they love who have not resolved, learning the system that they were in, and writing a storyline to resolve their plot. Because you are like the... in the episode, every episode so far that I've recorded has had somebody who has this big thing that they need to resolve and they just never did.
Yeah. And that's the curse of not being able to finish. I mean, unfinished campaigns are a huge thing constantly. It's very rare that you get to, because it's wild. Because when you do get to do that, the one time with the group, like I said, that I run, we got to do that. And whenever we did that resolution, we did our last session in that was, so it's been a year, what's going on? And everybody got to put a cap on everything, which was great. I feel like they enjoyed wrapping those stories, and I enjoyed having those stories wrapped, because there's nothing left hanging out there. Because there's been times, because I will do this thing sometimes where, like, if it's pretty clear that a campaign is about to die effectively, we kind of take stock of like, okay, so how are we feeling about this? We want to keep going. We want to this, we want to that. And then it's like maybe we'll move on to something else. Like, okay, so here's what you guys fucked up. Here's what this was going towards. Right. Here's this. Because like, I need to let that out. Yeah. Because the one thing as a DM that I suffer from sometimes is when I get a really good idea, I don't let it bake long enough. Right. I'll leave like a single little nugget, and if like somebody starts to catch on to it, I do this thing to where I'm terrified they're going to figure out what's going on, and then they're going to solve it anyways, and then my surprise is going to be there's only been one time where I've been able to pull that off completely, and it to where I've been leading up to something, right, and the result has been like, oh, wait a second, holy shit, what? And then like it's hit proper like I've wanted it.
That's I had a character die at my game master session not that long ago, well, probably a year ago now, but and everybody at the table is so scared of their characters dying, like, all the time. I always point out it's a huge problem. I'm like, you guys need to stop being so like paralyzingly afraid of their characters dying. And like they always ask, like, why are you not afraid of your character? Or like, why are you okay? Like, I was totally okay with my character dying. I was happy when my character died, and they were like, why are you so happy your character died? I was like, first of all, the character's death was really epic and tied up all of his storylines, which was amazing. But even if the character just dies riding his horse by a botch, that's the end of the story. We've gotten to the end of the story. Like, the lucky people in TTRPGs get to go to the end of the story. If the character is dead, it's over. The story is over. Whatever unresolved shit, it's whatever. Here lies so-and-so. He got trampled by a horse. Like, I'm still happy that the end happened, and I can move on to a new character completely guilt-free, that I'm not leaving this character twisting in the wind, waiting for the resolution that'll never come, we don't get to end stuff. Like, it's very hard to end stuff with role-playing games. It just is. But look, that is the end of the show. Neil, I want to thank you so much for taking time to do this and talking about Valcron the Unknowable. He's a really interesting character. Really liked it. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Well, just because we're talking about tabletop stuff, I mean, there is Ordo. I don't know when this is specifically going to come out, but I get to do a player in Ordo where I get to play. Apparently, he's just turning into an alcoholic as it stands right now. Not necessarily where I thought that character was going to go, but here we are.
I think his most hated compatriot, Preston, is going to be the one that pulls him back from the edge. Which is hysterical to me. How the relationships have twisted in the show is very interesting. You guys can
be rich. I am rich now.
Season 1 of that actual play is 6 episodes. We do a season per hunt, where we hunt evil monsters in 1950s, whatever. You can check that out on Spotify or on Old Man Gaming YouTube. Wizard's Respite himself, Ash, Game Masters that one. I actually get to play it, which is very exciting. Season 2, or the second hunt, will be coming out soon. I don't know when this is coming out because I want to have a couple of these in the bank before I start actually releasing them, but it will be in the vicinity of this, so keep an eye out for that. And again, thank you, Neil, for being here. I appreciate it. To everybody else out there, please check out wizardsrespite.com. It is great. It has all your TTRPG needs. And then Old Man Gaming for your video game needs. And all of the shows that you can see on Wizards Respite are also over on Old Man Gaming. You can contact me at Old Man Gaming DH on Facebook. On X, Old Man Gaming 9. And then, of course, join our Discord. Links in the description below. And then as long as you guys keep listening and watching, we'll keep making these. We will see you guys for the next character.